Yes, welcome once again. This is Video Learning Uganda, and we are still continuing with the mole concept questions of ordinary level chemistry. And this is question 2, which is right here on the screen. Calculate the number of moles of sulfate ions in 3.0 grams of aluminum sulfate. And in this case, as we have seen in earlier questions, we actually need the relative formula mass of the aluminum sulfate, but in this case now we are talking of ions. We're looking at the sulfate ions, and we look at the case of ionization of aluminum sulfate, and aluminum sulfate ionizes to sulfate ions as well as aluminum ions. So we need that equation so that we can get the actual mole ratio. As you can see right there, we're having the aluminum sulfate in solution ionizing to aluminum ions and sulfate ions. And when you look at the equation, we see that 1 mole of aluminum sulfate will ionize to 2 moles of aluminum ions and 3 moles of sulfate ions, as you can see right there. Now we are going to get the number of moles, and there are 2 ways, but in this particular video we shall look at one way to keep our video short. So we shall consider the relative formula mass of aluminum sulfate, and the relative formula mass of aluminum sulfate will lead us to the number of moles of the aluminum sulfate that is ionizing, because we have only 3.0 grams of aluminum sulfate, but the relative formula mass of aluminum sulfate will have 2 times 27 to cater for aluminum, and then we are going to have, for sulfur, we have 32, the relative atomic mass of sulfur times 3, because as you can see in the formula we have sulfur being bracketed by 3, and then for the oxygen we have 4 times 16, as you see have all 4 there, then the 3, so we have 16 by 4 by 3 to cater for the oxygen. Remember, relative formula mass is actually the total or the sum of the relative atomic mass of the individual atoms in the substance. So when we get 27 by 2, we get 54, and then 32 by 3 gives us it gives us 96, and we have also 16 by 4 by 3 to give us 192. So when we add this all together, it gives us a total of 342. So the 342, that is RFM, the relative formula mass of aluminum sulfate. Now the RFM will lead us to the number of moles. By formula, we would just get 3.0 and divide by 342 to get the moles of aluminum sulfate that is ionizing. But going slowly, we would say from first principles, 342 grams of aluminum sulfate contain 1 mole. Now because they contain 1 mole, then 1 gram of aluminum sulfate will contain 1 over the RFM moles of the substance, and we having 3.0. so when you look at 3.0 grams of aluminum sulfate, this will now contain 1 over the 342 times 3 moles of aluminum sulfate molecules. So we now have the moles of aluminum sulfate that is ionizing, but I am reserving the calculation bit of this and leaving it in factorized form, as you can see on the screen, because sometimes in the objectives you are given these solutions in factorized form, as you can see them there. So I'm leaving it that way, such that when you meet such questions in objectives, that is chemistry paper 1, you are not confused. So let's leave it like that and then continue using it like that, and we shall only get the final value. Remember, these questions when posted on Facebook page of Video Learning Uganda, we give you the final answer, so you can always try out this before you can check out the videos on our YouTube channel or also our WhatsApp, as some of you acquire them from our WhatsApp group and others on their individual WhatsApp numbers. As we have that now, we, however, should remember that 1 mole of aluminium sulfate ionizes to produce 3 moles of the sulfate ions. Now we have the above so many moles which we have not calculated, the 1 over 342 times 3.0 moles of aluminium sulfate. We now going to ratio. If 1 mole of aluminium sulfate molecules ionizes to 3 moles of sulfate ions, what about the above moles? We simply multiply. So we shall get 1 over that times those moles of aluminium sulfate to produce 1 over 342 by 3, again by 3, because 1 produces 3. So we get the other moles of the aluminium sulfate times what they produce, times what each produces, and that is 3. So we have 1 over 342 times 3 times 3. It is an interesting question. We're having 3, but let me hope you're differentiating the 3's very well. Moles of the sulfate ions, and that gives you what the solution was given as in the question, and that is 0.026 moles of the sulfate ions. So make sure you have that very solution. You can utilize your calculator and confirm that answer. Remember, this is Video Learning Uganda. Please keep with us as we enjoy our videos and we keep learning all the subjects. Thank you for attending this discussion.